Marie Curie was the fifth child in a highly educated family. She was a woman hungry for knowledge in a country where education was a male privilege. However, she had an unyielding will that she maintained throughout her life. Curie was the first woman Nobel laureate and also the first person to receive 2 Nobel Prizes. Her contributions to science and humanity are immeasurable. Today, you will learn about how Marie became a woman of science, what research she conducted, why the French press attacked her, and how her scientific discovery ultimately killed her. Her father, Władysław Sklodowski, was the director of a boys' gymnasium. Her mother, Bronisława Boguska, headed the Warsaw School for Girls. The Sklodowskis belonged to the minority nobility, which had been ruined by Poland's political misfortunes. On November 7, 1867, Marie Curie, Little Mania, was born. In 1868, Władysław became a teacher at another school, so Bronisława was forced to leave her position. The young family lived a fulfilling life, but their happiness and material well-being began to crumble. For example, as we will learn about in more detail later, Władysław invested his savings in a relative's business, an unsuccessful enterprise that soon went bankrupt. In addition, Bronisława was diagnosed with tuberculosis. However, she continued to lead an active life as a homemaker, and she appeared healthy. Strictly following the rules, she used separate dishes and never kissed the children. To the little Sklodowskis, their mother's terrible disease appeared in the form of various signs: the abrupt sounds of a dry cough from another room, a sorrowful shadow on Mr. Sklodowski's face, and a short phrase added to their bedtime prayer: "Lord, restore our mother's health." In 1872, the Poles, particularly the intelligentsia, were experiencing severe oppression under Russian rule. The uprisings that flared up after the partitions of Poland were brutally suppressed, with thousands of participants sent into exile and prison. Russification became part of everyday life. The Polish language and culture were banned in schools. A Russian official named Ivanov, responsible for education, closely monitored Polonisms in students' work and grew cold towards Sklodowski after the latter stood up for a student. "Mr. Ivanov," Sklodowski said, "if the child did make a mistake, then of course it was through oversight. After all, you yourself happen to make mistakes in the Russian language quite often. I am convinced that you, just like this child, do not make them on purpose." Mr. Sklodowski did not yet know what this moment of compassion would cost him. Maria's love for physics did not appear out of nowhere. She considered her father's study to be the most beautiful room in the family home. It was there, behind the gleaming display case, that she examined all kinds of physical instruments with interest. It would have been wonderful if she could have spent her entire childhood hidden away in this study, but that was not meant to be. One after another, misfortunes fell upon the Sklodowski family. One particular day in 1873 was especially dramatic. Upon returning from summer vacation, Mr. Sklodowski found an official envelope on his desk. By order of the authorities, he had lost his position as a sub-inspector, which meant that he had also lost his government-provided apartment and additional salary. This was a disgrace. The gymnasium director, Ivanov, had cruelly taken revenge on an insufficiently obsequious official. The Sklodowski family's pain was not limited to that dismissal. Sklodowski was typically a prudent man, but his brother-in-law drew him into a risky venture, a partnership to operate a miraculous steam mill. Sklodowski quickly lost all his savings to the tune of 30,000 rubles. 2 years before this misfortune, in January 1876, Marie had learned what grief was. Her father had been taking in lodgers to stay afloat financially. One of the boarders, having contracted typhus, infected her sisters Branya and Zosia. In one room, their consumptive mother tried to suppress her cough. In the next room, the 2 sisters moaned and shivered from severe chills. On Wednesday, Sklodowski fetched her children, Helena, Joseph, and Marie, and led them to their eldest sister. Zosia rested in a coffin, all in white, with her hands crossed on her chest. Her bloodless face seemed to smile, and despite her shaven head, she was surprisingly beautiful. typhus had snatched life from the young girl's fragile body. On May 9, 1878, Madame Sklodowska herself passed away as she wished, without struggle, surrounded by her husband, son, and daughters. She had only enough strength to offer a farewell message and make the sign of the cross with a trembling hand. Her last words were barely audible: "I love." With her mother's death, Marie turned away from God. The once happy and prosperous family was now barely making ends meet. Vladislav decided to do everything he could to ensure that his children grew up educated and obtained decent jobs. A talented teacher of physics and mathematics, he taught his children in his free time. All the Sklodowsky children were extraordinarily talented. Marie was an especially diligent and hard-working girl. She graduated from high school with a gold medal, just like her brother and sisters. Ultimately, Josef became a general practitioner. Branya became a doctor and the first director of the Radium Institute, and Helena became a teacher and social activist. The problem of their future was straightforward. Their father's current salary as a teacher was barely enough to pay for the apartment, a cook, and food, and soon he would have to retire on a small pension. Therefore, Josef, Branya, Helena, and Manya had to start earning a living immediately. Naturally, the first thought of the son and daughters of two educators was to give lessons. The young Sklodowskis joined the hundreds of intelligent young people running around Warsaw in search of tutoring jobs. From here stretches the thin thread that led Marie to great achievements. The Sklodowsky sisters attended the underground flying university, where volunteer teachers taught courses in anatomy, history, and sociology. Lectures were held secretly, and an inspection could lead to imprisonment. The flying university not only expanded the education of high school graduates, but also involved them in mentorship. One of Marie's friends persuaded her to teach lessons to poor women. Thus, she began working with seamstresses, reading them books, and creating a library in the Polish language. This work captivated 17-year-old Manya. Surrounded from childhood by her father's physics instruments, she had inherited his scientific curiosity. However, her interests were expanding. Manya dreamed not only of mathematics and chemistry, but also of changing society, striving to enlighten people. One day, she and her sister Branya thought deeply about their future. Josef and Helena did not incite much concern. The young man would become a doctor, while the passionate beauty Helena tried to decide whether to become a teacher or a singer. It was then that the sisters realized one couldn't make a fortune off a salary of 50 kopecks. How could the two sisters, Branya and Marie, build careers in science without money and higher education? In fact, they couldn't pursue higher education in Poland, as universities were intended only for men. One day, seeing Branya counting her savings, Manya proposed a solution. They could take turns helping each other. Branya would go to Paris on her savings, and Manya, having secured a position as a governess, would send money to support her. When Branya became a doctor, it would be her turn to pay for Manya's education. Branya resisted for a long time, but eventually she gave in. The dream of becoming a doctor was too strong, as was her deep love for her sister, who was so touchingly sacrificing her youthful years. Marie secured a position as a governess. However, it soon became apparent that neither the family nor her surroundings suited the headstrong young woman. She considered them ignoramuses, with whom she couldn't find common ground. Even after returning home, she couldn't find peace. Manya realized that her sacrifices were insufficient. Her income went to daily necessities, and almost nothing was left with which to support Branya. Plus, their father would soon have to retire, and then he would need help too. Therefore, Manya decided to take a well-paid job in the provinces. On the frosty morning of January 1, 1886, a difficult day of farewell arrived. Manya, having written down her new address for her father, said goodbye and boarded a train. Once alone, she felt fear and the burden of loneliness. She quickly got used to the new place, and her hosts turned out to be good people. Among them, Casimir, the eldest son of the family, stood out. Marie was a unique woman. She skated, drove carriages, rode horseback, and composed poems. She also gave Polish reading and writing lessons to children. In this way, she turned the head of the son of her wealthy benefactors. However, Casimir's parents opposed their son's relationship with a poor governess and soon found him a more suitable, in their view, match. If only they had known what Marie's studies in Paris would lead to. Deeply hurt, Marie decided to forget about pursuing happiness. She had no choice, as leaving the family would result in the loss of a significant salary. In 1888, Marie's father, having left government service, found work as the director of a shelter for juvenile delinquents. Thus, he was able to support Branya. Branya, in turn, asked Manya to stop sending money. Therefore, Manya could start saving funds for herself. In March 1890, Branya wrote to Marie, informing the latter of her plans to get married in the summer and to stay in Paris for a year. She advised Marie to save more money and visit her as soon as possible so that she could attend lectures at the Sorbonne. Here, the story of the great woman scientist could have ended, for Marie declined her sister's offer. It took Branya tremendous effort to convince her sister to come. Marie worked as a governess for another year and saved her earnings. After traveling by train to Paris, third class through Poland and France, and fourth class through Germany, almost in a freight car, Marie settled in with her sister and her sister's husband. After half a year, however, she moved out and rented a cold attic room located close to libraries, laboratories, and her university. She refused to get a roommate, as she didn't want anyone to disturb her late-night studies. Marie cooked food on an alcohol burner, and her modest diet consisted at best of bread, eggs, or fruit, and chocolate. Marie chose to study mathematics, chemistry, and physics. These choices seemed strange, as most women studied medicine. In those times, women were considered flighty and endearingly silly beings, incapable of grasping the heights of hard sciences. Medicine was presented to women as a happy medium between inherently humanitarian sciences and the male world, to which women were admitted only with extreme reluctance. But Marie didn't care about prejudices. With her savings, she enrolled in lectures that interested her. Her place in the chemical laboratory allowed her to conduct experiments under the guidance of instructors. Young men, enchanted by her modest yet graceful appearance and ash-blonde hair, discussed her with curiosity. But what did an experienced student like her care about some young man? She faced problems that required urgent solutions. Marie soon came to recognize the vast gap in knowledge with which years in the Polish countryside had endowed her. Gritting her teeth, she sought to absorb more information. Unfortunately, this didn't turn out well for her. In parallel with her studies, she undertook a scientific internship in a laboratory led by her cousin, Yosef Boguski, the future assistant to Dmitry Mendeleev. Her hectic lifestyle and lack of money led to frequent fainting spells. During the day, Marie studied intensively. In the evenings, she taught for a small wage. In 1892, her budget was 100 francs per month. This money was barely enough for food and rent, not to mention heating and warm clothes. Marie economized on entertainment, food, lighting, and heating and transportation. She walked to the university on foot. One day, Marie collapsed in the middle of class. A classmate ran to seek help from Branya and her husband. Once again, they took in Marie so that she could save money on housing and eat properly. The married couple, both doctors, got Marie back on her feet. However, Marie's efforts had not been in vain. For her academic achievements, she was awarded a 600-ruble grant from the Alexandrovich Foundation. In addition, she was one of the best students at the university, graduating first in her class in 1893. She received 2 diplomas, a licentiate degree in physics, and a year later, one in mathematics. Marie planned to return to Warsaw after obtaining her degree and, following her parents' example, teach in Poland's educational institutions. However, these plans fell apart when she met a man whom she would soon have to reject. Kowalski, a professor of physics from Freiburg University, visited Paris with his wife, who knew Marie from the village where she had worked as a governess. Learning about Marie's difficulties with the laboratory, which lacked equipment for her research, Kowalski suggested that she meet a young scientist at the School of Physics and Chemistry on Rue Le Monde. In a simple, restrained statement, Marie described their first meeting, which took place in the spring of 1894. When I entered, Pierre Curie was standing in the opening of a glass door leading to the balcony. He seemed very young to me, although he was 35 years old at the time. A conversation began between us, quickly turning into a friendly chat. He was engaged in such scientific questions about which I was very interested to know his opinion. Pierre was attracted to the delicate, fair-haired, gray-eyed woman, and he allocated a small corner of his laboratory for Marie. Gradually, they became friends and developed a feeling of mutual trust. Soon, Pierre asked for permission to visit her. Ultimately, he asked Marie to return to Paris after the holidays, hinting that he did not want to lose her. "You have no right to abandon science," which for him meant, "You have no right to abandon me." Pierre raised the question of the future several times and finally proposed to Marie. However, contrary to all the laws of romance novels, she refused. She couldn't give up the idea of being useful to her homeland. After passing her exams, Marie decided to return to Warsaw, at least for the summer. This left Pierre with only friendship, which no longer satisfied him. Pierre accompanied her mentally, but he could not join her physically. Instead, he wrote letters, reminding her that he was waiting for her in Paris. In October, Marie returned to Paris and continued working on her doctoral dissertation, but she could not shake her faithful pursuer. Gradually, he earned her trust and inclined her to the idea of a union in which they could not only be together, but also work on scientific discoveries. On July 26, 1895, Marie woke up in her room on Chateauneuf Street for the last time. That day, she would become Madame Pierre Curie. Her wedding dress was a simple dark blue suit, sewn at her request. A practical woman, she would wear it for many years while working in the laboratory. The couple refused a lavish ceremony. Instead, they opted for a registration at the mayor's office in Sceaux, attended by those close to them. During a 3-month interval in 1897, Marie gave the world her first child, her daughter Irene, and the results of her first research. Her work on the magnetic properties of hardened steel was published in the Bulletin of the Society for the Encouragement of National Industry. Then, she received alarming news. Marie's health had deteriorated since her pregnancy. Doctors found a tuberculosis lesion in her left lung. Given the fact that her mother had died of consumption, the doctors advised Marie to spend several months in a sanatorium. However, the stubborn woman refused to follow their advice. She had many other concerns: the laboratory, her husband, the house, her daughter. Irene's crying, due to teething, the flu, or another minor ailment, often disrupted the peace, causing both physicists to suffer sleepless nights. Marie's father-in-law was an invaluable helper. Having lost his wife to breast cancer just 3 days after Irene's birth, Dr. Curie became deeply attached to his little granddaughter. 2 degrees, the title of lecturer, and work on the magnetic properties of hardened steel. That was the sum of Marie's achievements by the end of 1897, when, having recovered from childbirth, she returned to her scientific endeavors. The next important step, one that would bring her unprecedented fame, was to choose the topic of her doctoral dissertation. In search of inspiration, she studied the latest works in physics and discussed them with Pierre, who was her scientific mentor. Flipping through articles, she came across Henri Becquerel's research on the radiation of uranium salts, which occurred without exposure to light. This phenomenon intrigued her. The energy that uranium emitted in the form of radiation remained a mystery. For Marie, this opened up a vast field of research. Inspired by the novelty of the topic, she decided to dedicate her dissertation to it. She saw an opportunity to make an important discovery. For purposes of conducting her experiments, Marie obtained a ground-floor workshop from the director of the School of Physics. The workshop had originally served as a storeroom and engine room. The space was poorly suited for research, and due to dampness and temperature fluctuations, both the sensitive electrometers and Marie's health suffered. However, Marie found a way to conduct experiments using an ionization chamber, the Curie electrometer, and a piezoelectric quartz crystal. After several weeks of research, she established that the intensity of the radiation was proportional to the uranium content in the samples and did not depend on illumination or temperature. This was a promising result. Striving to measure the ionizing effect of uranium rays, Marie hypothesized that their radiation had an atomic origin. She asked herself, could this property also be inherent in other elements? Thus, Marie tested all known elements and, in the process, discovered that thorium also emitted such rays. She called this phenomenon radioactivity, and uranium and thorium radio elements. Enthralled by her discovery, Marie expanded her research to various minerals, including elements, their salts, and oxides. Using an electroscope, she conducted tests that plunged her into an unknown area of science, one in which her discoveries would become the foundation for further research. Marie assumed that minerals without uranium or thorium would be inactive, and that those containing them would exhibit radioactivity. However, unexpectedly, she discovered that some minerals had significantly stronger radiation than could be explained by the amount of uranium or thorium they contained. After rechecking the results, Marie concluded that these minerals contained an unknown radioactive element. She shared her hypothesis with Pierre and Brogna, despite the skepticism of colleagues who considered the results to be a mistake. But there was no mistake. Marie's confidence in the discovery did not ignite instantly. It was strengthened through intense work and verification. This led her to a revolutionary finding: the existence of a new chemical element. In a report published by the Proceedings of the Academy on April 12, 1898, Marie Sklodowska-Curie stated, "A new chemical element with high radioactivity is probably present in uranium minerals." She noted that uraninite and chalcolites were significantly more active than uranium itself, which indicated the presence of a more active element. Thus, the first step toward the discovery of radium was made. Marie was intuitively convinced of the existence of a new substance and sought to confirm the hypothesis experimentally. Inspired by her success, Pierre temporarily left his research and joined her work, doubling their efforts. In a damp workshop on Rue Le Monde, both scientists began a multi-year study. From that point on, each of their contributions became inseparable. They made discoveries together, and their signatures appeared on all scientific works that they produced. This union of talents and dedication to science was interrupted only by Pierre's tragic passing. But Marie would continue their work, fully realizing her scientific potential. The Curies began searching for a very active substance in pitchblende, whose radioactivity exceeded that of pure uranium. They believed that the new element was present in extremely small quantities. Using chemical analysis, they isolated fractions with unusual radioactivity and realized that there were two of them. In July 1898, they announced the discovery of one of these elements. "You must give it a name," Pierre said. Marie decided to name the element polonium, in honor of her native Poland. Their announcement of this discovery appeared in the Proceedings of the Academy of Sciences, and simultaneously in the Polish publication Światło, confirming Marie's attachment to her homeland. However, a sad event overshadowed their work. The Dluski family decided to leave Paris, settle in Poland, and open a tuberculosis sanatorium in Zakopane, in the Carpathians. Marie and Brogna parted with great sadness. Marie had lost a close friend and source of support. For the first time, she acutely felt herself to be in exile. In a school notebook with a canvas cover, between notes on Irene's development and a recipe for making jelly, an important entry has been preserved. Composed by Pierre, Marie, and their colleague G. Bemont, it reports on the discovery of a second radioactive element in uranium ore. This entry was published on December 26, 1898, in the Proceedings of the Academy of Sciences. Here are a few lines from it. Based on the various reasons just outlined, we are inclined to believe that the new radioactive substance contains a new element, which we propose to call radium. The new radioactive substance undoubtedly also contains an admixture of barium in very large quantities, but even so, it possesses significant radioactivity. The radioactivity of radium itself must be enormous. Here, we can highlight an interesting effect regarding the skepticism of the scientific community. Upon reading the announcement of radium's discovery, an average person did not doubt its existence and was ready to marvel at its properties, no matter how unusual they seemed. Physicists, however, approached this matter more cautiously, as the properties of polonium and radium contradicted traditional theories about matter. They were interested in the Curie's work, but awaited precise results. Chemists, in turn, were even stricter. For them, proof would only come from the ability to see radium, weigh it, and determine its atomic weight. Until then, chemists remained skeptical. Without an atomic weight, radium did not exist for them. To show radium and polonium to skeptics, prove the existence of their creations, and ultimately convince themselves, the Curies would need 4 years of relentless work. They couldn't find an appropriate place for research in university buildings, so they returned to the old workshop at the School of Physics. After a long search, they were allocated an abandoned shed with a leaking roof and modest equipment. An ordinary worker would not have willingly worked in such a place. Pierre and Marie decided to do it anyway. Here is what Marie wrote about her dilapidated shelter. "We had neither money, nor laboratory, nor assistance to properly carry out this important and difficult task. It was necessary to create something out of nothing. And if Kazimierz Deluski once called my student years the heroic years of my sister-in-law's life, then I can say without exaggeration that this period was a heroic epoch in the joint life of me and my husband. But it was precisely in this lousy old shed that the best and happiest years of our lives passed, wholly dedicated to work. Often I would prepare some food right there so as not to interrupt the course of an especially important operation. Sometimes I spent the whole day stirring a boiling mass with an iron rod almost as tall as myself. In the evening, I would collapse from fatigue." Under such conditions, the Curies worked from 1898 to 1902. In 1902, 48 months after the day when the Curies announced the probable existence of radium, Marie achieved victory. She isolated 1 decigram of pure radium and determined its atomic weight, equal to 225. The disbelieving chemists, some remained, had to bow before the facts and the superhuman perseverance of this woman. Now, radium received official recognition. However, the family life of the 2 devoted scientists was not devoid of romance. The workday had been hard, so they should have rested. But Pierre and Marie did not seek easy paths. Throwing on their coats and informing Dr. Curie of their departure, they headed to the laboratory. Passing through the country yard and opening the creaky door, they found themselves in their shed, their scientific kingdom. "Don't turn on the light," said Marie. She added softly, "Do you remember the day when you said, 'I wish radium had a beautiful color'?" Radium had surpassed all their expectations. It glowed. In the darkness, the vessels of radium on the shelves emitted a bluish light, as if suspended in the air. "Look, look," whispered Marie. She carefully sat down, absorbed by this mysterious glow, in complete silence and stillness, her gaze fixed on her discovery. She would remember this evening forever. However, once again, life punished Marie for her brief happiness and carelessness. In May 1902, she hurried to Poland after receiving news that her father was ill. The journey was long, and when she reached Warsaw, her father had already passed away. Devastated, Marie insisted on seeing him one last time. To fulfill the desperate wish of the inconsolable daughter, the workers unsealed the coffin. Looking at the face of old Skłodowski, she silently said goodbye and blamed herself for the long separation. Shortly before his death, her father had received the news of her success in isolating radium. Had he lived just 2 more years, he would have learned that Marie and Pierre had received the Nobel Prize. From 1899 to 1904, the Curies published 32 scientific papers, both together and with other scientists. These studies, with dry titles and complex formulas, represented significant scientific achievements and symbolized the persistence, curiosity, and talent of the researchers. News of the Curies' discovery of radioactivity quickly spread beyond France. From 1900 onward, scientists from England, Germany, Austria, and other countries began reaching out to them for explanations and advice. The couple exchanged letters with renowned researchers such as Sir William Crookes and Professors Suez and Boltzmann. This contributed to the discovery of new radioactive elements like mesothorium and radiothorium. Radium was an unusual substance with astonishing properties. The pure compound of radium with chlorine is a white powder resembling salt, but with incredible activity. Its radiation is 2 million times stronger than that of uranium. It penetrates materials, remaining active even in a sealed vessel, and only a thick lead screen can stop it. In addition, radium emits heat, can phosphoresce in the dark, turns air into a conductor, and can even affect surrounding objects by coloring or destroying them. Marie Curie noted that the radium she emitted glowed so brightly in the dark that its light was sufficient for reading. Radium also imparts phosphorescent properties to substances such as diamonds, allowing them to be distinguished from fakes. The Curie notebooks, even decades after their deaths, remain radioactive. Given its destructive effect on tissues, radium began to be used in medicine at the beginning of the 20th century. The Curies discovered its therapeutic potential, particularly for the treatment of cancer and malignant tumors. After initial experiments on themselves and animals, fellow scientists proved radium's ability to destroy diseased cells, which laid the foundation for the development of Curie therapy. French doctors who applied radium in test tubes to treat skin diseases noted the restoration of healthy tissue after the partial destruction of the epidermis. In 1904, Armé de Lille decided to open a factory dedicated to the production of radium for medical purposes. This offered Pierre and Marie Curie a convenient facility for their research. Together with new colleagues like F. Audepin and Jacques Dan, the couple continued their work in isolating radium. The first gram of radium that Marie obtained became a symbol of her selflessness. Other grams acquired great material value, becoming the most expensive substances in the world. 1 gram was valued at 750,000 francs. Marie refused the right to inherit this precious gram. Instead, she gave it to the laboratory. On July 25, 1903, Marie appeared before the scientists of the Sorbonne to defend her doctoral dissertation, the result of more than 5 years of work. While developing the technology for purifying pitchblende and producing radium, Marie refused to patent it despite Pierre's suggestion. She firmly stated that a patent would contradict the spirit of science, as radium could be used to treat the sick, and it would be wrong to profit from this. On December 10, 1903, the Academy of Sciences in Stockholm announced the awarding of the Nobel Prize in Physics to Henri Becquerel and the Curies for their discoveries in the field of radioactivity. However, due to deteriorating health and overwork, Pierre and Marie could not attend the ceremony. The awards were received on their behalf by the French ambassador, who accepted the diploma and medals from the king. Each day brought new responsibilities, especially in 1904, when Marie was expecting another child. She temporarily left her teaching position at the Savour School and returned home exhausted, sometimes buying a bit of caviar that reminded her of Warsaw. Near the end of her pregnancy, she experienced severe exhaustion and anxiety about her husband's health and the future of the child. She was struck by a severe depressive episode. On December 6, 1904, Marie gave birth to their second daughter, Eve. Marie's sister Bronislava, who came to assist with the birth, comforted Marie. Gradually, Marie warmed up, finding joy in the baby's smiles. She regained her zest for life, resumed working in the laboratory at the Seaver, and, with her former determination, continued along the difficult path. But life cannot honor us with only victories. There must be a fly in the ointment. April 19, 1906, was a cloudy and rainy day. Pierre Curie had planned activities, meeting with colleagues, proofreading at the publishers, and visiting the institute. Marie had errands around the city. They parted quickly, barely having time to exchange words. As usual, Pierre was occupied with work matters. While walking down Dauphine Street, lost in thought, he found himself between a fiacre and a freight wagon. The wagon's horses didn't have time to stop, and the rear wheel passed over Pierre's head, killing him instantly. Passers-by panicked. No one wanted to put the body into a carriage. Finally, they found a stretcher on which to carry him to the police station. This day changed Marie forever. It deprived her not only of her husband, but also of inner peace, making her profoundly lonely. On one of the last evenings before Brogna's departure, Marie decided to destroy the clothes that Pierre had worn on the day of his death. In the bedroom, having locked the door and prepared the fireplace, they burned these items, still soaked with blood and dirt. Finding solace in this ritual, Marie bade farewell to her husband's last belongings. The next day, she became reserved and detached again, striving to return to life despite the heavy loss. In November 1906, Marie delivered a lecture for the first time at the Sorbonne chair previously held by her husband. The crowd waited impatiently to see the famous widow. Among the audience members were students, scientists, and socialites who had little interest in the lecture's topic. At 1:30, Marie entered the auditorium, and everyone fell silent. She began with the phrase at which Pierre's course had been interrupted. When one stands face to face with the successes achieved by physics, the simple words brought tears to many. Now, she led the research and gave instructions to assistants and students, striving to create a laboratory that embodied Pierre's dreams and allowed young scholars to develop the science of radioactivity. Her main support remained her father-in-law, Dr. Curie, who was steadfast and rational. The loss of Pierre was a blow to him, but he drew strength from strict rationalism and did not visit the cemetery after his son's funeral. His restraint and unwillingness to indulge in grief encouraged Marie to cope with the loss and maintain outward calm. Marie cared for Dr. Curie during his illness, especially in 1909, when he became seriously ill with pneumonia. She spent all her free time at his bedside. After his death in 1910, she insisted that Pierre's coffin be exhumed and placed above Dr. Curie's coffin so that husband and father could rest together. She asked that a place be left for herself as well. Working as a professor, researcher, and laboratory director, Marie continued teaching at the École Normale Supérieure in Sèvres and at the Sorbonne, where she offered the world's only course on radioactivity. In 1910, she published her foundational work, the 911-page Treatise on Radioactivity, which consolidated the accumulated knowledge since the discovery of radium. Instead of her own portrait, she placed a photograph of Pierre on the title page. 2 years earlier, she had edited and published his works. Marie created the first international radium standard, 21 milligrams of pure radium chloride, which became the model for standards worldwide. Marie's renown grew rapidly. France offered her titles and awards, but she refused the Legion of Honor, maintaining Pierre's stance on official accolades. In 1911, her colleagues, seeking to acknowledge her achievements, nominated her for the Academy of Sciences. However, the elections turned into a fierce confrontation between supporters and opponents of electing a woman. Marie fell one vote short. Nevertheless, international recognition was not delayed. In December of that year, Marie was awarded her second Nobel Prize, this time in chemistry. Thus, she became the first person to receive the award twice. 24 years later, her daughter Irene received her own Nobel Prize in the same hall for the discovery of artificial radioactivity. Marie Curie's enormous achievements and global fame evoked admiration in some, but envy and hostility in others. Soon, she faced a wave of malice and attacks aimed at her downfall. Exhausted and alone, she was accused of destroying another's family and dishonoring the name she bore. It was discovered that she was in a romantic relationship with her colleague, Paul Langevin. He was 5 years younger than Marie and had been a student of her late husband. No one would have paid attention to this relationship if not for the fact that Langevin was married and had 4 children. Paul's wife found out about the affair when she discovered Marie's letters. Madame Langevin made the relationship public and demanded a divorce, money, and custody of the children. This happened just a few days before Marie was awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. The intensity of hostility and false accusations drove Marie to the brink of despair. The widow has tarnished the good name of her late husband. Such accusations filled the newspaper columns. Some publications noted that she was Jewish and condemned her for ruining the life of an honest French woman. Journalists also spread rumors that Curie's affair with Langevin had begun when Pierre was still alive. This time, Marie couldn't ignore the situation. Parisians gathered around her house, wanting to express their discontent. With her daughters, the researcher left home and hid for a while in an acquaintance's apartment. When she returned to France, the story of her affair had ceased to interest the public. Langevin separated from his wife, but Marie still ended her relationship with him. Marie received an offer to return to Poland and head a laboratory for the study of radioactivity, which both revived and unsettled her. In May 1912, a Polish delegation led by Henryk Sienkiewicz urged her to return. He convinced her that this would inspire the people and revive faith in science and the future of Poland. For Marie, it would have been a convenient way to leave Paris and thereby avoid persecution and criticism. However, the thought of the unfinished laboratory, the long-held dream of the Curie family, held her back. Torn between her duty to her homeland and her duty to France, Marie sent a refusal to Poland, proposing to manage the laboratory through her assistants. In 1913, despite illnesses, Marie attended the opening of the laboratory and delivered a lecture for the first time in Polish, her native language. In the summer of 1913, Marie set off on a hiking trip through the Alps with her daughters, their governess, and physicist Albert Einstein and his son. A close friendship had existed between Marie and Einstein for several years, built on mutual admiration and a shared love of physics. Einstein animatedly shared his theories, which Marie was one of the few to fully understand. The children ran ahead, occasionally overhearing Einstein's unusual musings. Suddenly, he stopped to discuss with Marie the idea of a passenger in a falling elevator, thereby illustrating his theory of relativity. In 1909, a battle among educational institutions began in Paris. The main prize was Marie Curie. The Pasteur Institute and the University of Sorbonne could not yield such an outstanding scientist to each other. Therefore, they reached an agreement to establish the Radium Institute, which would include laboratories for radiation and biological research. After long, sorrowful years, Curie's dream of a fully equipped laboratory had come true. In the wonderful days of July, the Temple of the Future on Pierre Curie Street was completed. But it was July 1914. What followed was a history of blood. In the summer of 1914, the outbreak of war forced Marie to stay in Paris. Most of her colleagues went to the front. Deciding to help her country, Marie immediately found an important task: equipping frontline hospitals with X-ray machines. At the time, France had only a few X-ray machines, and the military medical service planned to use them only in major centers. Having no experience working with X-rays, but possessing theoretical knowledge, Marie realized that they would be urgently needed at the front. After gathering equipment from university laboratories and recruiting volunteers, she began equipping hospitals. To help the wounded in field hospitals, where there were often no sources of electricity, Marie devised a mobile X-ray station. With funds from the Union of French Women, the first radiological car was equipped with an X-ray machine and a dynamo powered by the car's engine. During the Battle of the Marne, this mobile station enabled the examination of many wounded soldiers who had been evacuated to Paris. Later, people affectionately nicknamed these cars Little Curies. Marie was well aware of the contribution she had made to helping France, although she refused awards such as the Legion of Honor. Those close to her knew that in 1918, the For Military Merit Award would have been the only one she would have accepted with pride. However, she did not have to break her principles. Instead of her, many society ladies received awards, and Marie's merits were soon forgotten. No one thought to award her the Soldier's Cross. The war was over, and Madame Curie's life returned to its former course. However, her official life took a more dramatic turn. On May 20, 1921, U.S. President Harding presented her with a gram of radium, symbolically housed in a lead casket for her research. During the ceremonial event in Washington, Curie was moved by the president's words about her contributions to science and humanity. However, Marie insisted on making changes to the deed of gift. The radium should not become private property. She did everything she could to ensure that her work belonged wholly to science. Irene and Eve Curie, who accompanied their mother on the trip, often stood in for her at official events. Irene, donning an academic gown, accepted honorary degrees on Marie's behalf. Organizers mistakenly addressed the 16-year-old Eve as Madame Curie, delivering speeches about her outstanding achievements and expecting a response. In cities where there was debate over who would host Marie, her daughters were placed in the homes of the most persistent organizers to give their mother some well-deserved rest. Although Marie was modest, it was clear that she had won the sympathy of Americans and gained the affection of those who interacted closely with her. She especially remembered the activities of the universities, including their ceremonial traditions and student sports, as well as the role of women's organizations that supported her. However, the excellent equipment found in American laboratories and hospitals caused her sadness, for in France, there was not yet a single hospital for radium treatment. In 1925, Marie visited Warsaw for the founding of a research institute. She was received with warmth and love. During the celebrations, she was granted honorary titles from universities, academies, and cities. The President of Poland, Stanislaw Wojciechowski, an old comrade of Marie's from Paris, laid the first brick. Marie laid the second, while the mayor of Warsaw laid the third. For the last time, Marie saw Poland, the ancient streets of her hometown, and the Vistula River, which she admired on every visit. She looked at it with longing, almost with pangs of conscience. In France, on the initiative of Baron Rothschild, the Autonomous Curie Fund was established in 1920 to support the scientific and medical work of the Radium Institute. In 1922, members of the Medical Academy proposed electing Madame Curie as a corresponding member for her contribution to the discovery of radium and the development of radiotherapy. She was elected on February 7, 1922. The president of the Academy noted that Madame Curie had become the first female academician and was a true example for others. Marie's scientific achievements were overshadowed by the threat of blindness, which came in the form of progressive cataracts. However, she did not disclose this, not even to colleagues. Instead, she shared the secret only with those who were closest to her. In 1923, Marie underwent her first eye surgery. 3 more followed. Gradually, she learned to live with her diminished vision. Madame Curie spoke often about her death, seeking to discuss it calmly. However, deep down, she repelled this thought, defending against it with numerous projects. Ignoring her deteriorating vision and tinnitus, Marie worked persistently. She founded a factory for processing radioactive minerals and engaged in scientific research. Despite warnings, she worked with radioactive substances without proper protection, which greatly affected her health. In December 1933, an unknown illness worsened, revealing a gallstone, the same affliction that had claimed her father. Fearing surgery, Marie resorted to a strict diet and daily regimen to heal herself. It didn't help much. Marie Curie's health was deteriorating. On good days, she worked in the laboratory. On bad days, she wrote at home. On May 8, 1934, she wrote to Bronislava about her dream of building a house with a garden. However, her condition quickly worsened. Marie developed a fever, which she tried to ignore. After a visit from Professor Boulin, she was ordered to rest, but Marie did not stop. She visited the laboratory one more time. Eventually, Marie could no longer leave her bed. She was treated for an illness initially identified as the flu or bronchitis. Specialists could find no clear sign of disease, but they did discover inflammation in the lungs. Marie was prescribed compresses and cupping therapy. She considered going to a sanatorium. Marie continued to talk about the future, mentioning the laboratory, the Warsaw Institute, and the fate of her children. She knew that in a few months, Irene and her husband Frederick would receive the Nobel Prize. Marie dreamed of living in a new apartment, which she would not live to see, or in a house in Sceaux, which would never be built. Growing weaker by the day, she agreed to a consultation with the best doctors. Half an hour of examination led them to diagnose tuberculosis. They hoped that mountain air would help. It didn't. Marie's fever rose, and she meticulously monitored it like the scientist she was. The summoned doctor discovered a sharp decrease in blood cells, diagnosing pernicious anemia and prescribing treatment, although there was little hope. Marie fought the pain as Eve tried to protect her from the fear of death, prohibiting painful procedures and gatherings at the bedside. Until the very last moment, this maintained Marie's belief that she would live. On the morning of July 3rd, Marie took her temperature and noticed its sharp drop. When Eve assured her that it was a sign of recovery, Marie smiled and, looking at the sun, said, "It wasn't the medicines that helped me, but the fresh air, the altitude." During her agony, tormented by pain, she half whispered, "I can't express anything. I'm absent." Random thoughts about work still arose in her mind. The paragraphs of the chapters need to be made uniform. Glancing at a cup of tea, she asked, "Is this made from radium or mesothorium?" When the doctor prepared for an injection, Marie, showing her willpower for the last time, weakly whispered, "I don't want it. Leave me alone." In the last hours of Marie Curie's life, all her strength manifested itself. Her frail body resisted for a long time. Dr. Pierre Lovis and Eve held her stiffened hands for 16 hours until, at dawn, in the light of the rising sun, Marie's heart stopped. Later, scientists established that the cause of the unusual symptoms and anemia was radiation stemming from exposure to radium. At the Sanitarium of Saint-Silemus, Dr. Taube made an official record. Madame Marie Curie passed away in Saint-Silemus on July 4, 1934. Illness: acute malignant anemia. The bone marrow did not respond, possibly due to degeneration from prolonged accumulation of radioactive emissions. At the idle instruments of the Radium Institute, young scientists wept. On July 6, 1934, Madame Curie was laid to rest in Sceaux, without pomp and speeches. Surrounded by relatives, friends, and devoted colleagues, her coffin was placed on Pierre Curie's coffin. Bronya and Joseph threw a handful of Polish soil into the grave. A year later, her last book was published. It was a strict gray volume with the author's name on the cover. Madame Curie, professor at the Sorbonne University, Nobel Prize laureate in physics, Nobel Prize laureate in chemistry, and in the title, a single word: radioactivity. Marie Curie's life was an outstanding example of scientific achievement, perseverance, and selflessness. She was the first woman to receive the Nobel Prize, and at that time, the only person to be honored with it twice in different sciences, physics and chemistry. Her research on radium and polonium not only revealed radioactivity to the world, but also ushered in a new era in science and medicine, inspiring the development of radiotherapy and greatly influencing the study of atomic energy. Despite her fame, Curie lived modestly and refused to patent her discoveries, as she considered them to be property of all humanity. She faced many obstacles due to her origin and gender, but her resilience and diligence made her one of the most influential women scientists in history. Marie participated in public affairs, especially during World War I, when she organized mobile X-ray units to help the wounded at the front. Marie also cemented her legacy by laying the foundations for scientific institutes in France and Poland. Despite severe illnesses caused by years of working with radioactive substances, she continued her research until her final days. Her life is a story of incredible scientific passion, perseverance in the face of difficulties, and dedication to the highest ideals of science and humanity.